Hey, HTDA, and after completely redesigning my factory in the last episode, today we are leaving behind the early game and we are going to use all of this room to swiftly upgrade to green science. Green science is going to unlock pretty much everything in the middle of this technology tree, all the way down to the yellow science over here, which includes things like the space warehouse, which is going to be very interesting because it's a mechanic that's quite unique to this game, but it is also going to include a couple of other useful things like upgrading our mining efficiency and of course solar panels, which are pretty much my favorite in any game they're going to be included in. However, first things first, we actually need that green science up and running, and honestly, that's not even that trivial. In order to build most of the stuff that's coming up, we're going to need some wire, we're going to need some electronics, so we might as well start building that and automating that. Luckily, making wires and electronics is super simple because we are already making the Technim rods, and that's actually all we need. So I expanded my platform a little bit to the back. I left myself plenty of room again. That's very important. You don't want to run into any aggravating issues later on. And then I have two assemblers making wires over here, just from the Technim rods, which are going to go in the back over here. And then those same Technim rods are actually fitting into two more assemblers over here. Those are making the electronics from the wires and the rods from the other side, and then putting those out here in this little stockpile over here. And then you might be wondering where this belt is going. Well, that belt with the electronics is actually hopping over a couple of the other belts, and then it's feeding into this assembler over here, which is positioned right next to where I was making the conveyor Mark 1s. Conveyor belts Mark 1? I don't know. Anyway, the point is I'm making conveyor belts Mark II, and actually that's really easy to do now because I only need the electronic components and the Mark I conveyor belts and machinery parts, but you actually also need machinery parts in order to make the Mark I belt. So all you need to do is make sure you have that exact same belt moving on a little bit further than that and feeding into the second assembler as well. And now I'm making both Mark I and Mark II belts. And I do actually recommend that you make both of them, because honestly, the Mark II are a lot more expensive than the Mark Is, and you often only need a Mark I belt to do a lot of the stuff. Other than maybe exporting things across large distances in large quantities, but for most of the stuff we're making, a Mark I belt is going to be more than sufficient. Now, in order to make green science, we're going to need pipes, which we already have, and we're going to need advanced machinery parts and concrete. Now, concrete is something we're not actually producing right now, but advanced machinery parts is something we can actually very easily already start producing. All we need are the machinery parts we're actually producing over here, and we're producing more of that than we need. So the reason I'm standing on these stairs over here is to show you that I'm splitting off the advanced machinery parts that I'm already producing, and then this belt is going to go all the way across here into this assembler in the back. Now you might be wondering why I decided to have this belt go all the way around, and honestly that's mostly to keep it out of the way of everything else. I could have gone right through the middle over here, but as you can see this is quite crowded. And because this is the area that I want to start advancing into, I also don't want to have belts crisscrossing there in the front. So this is just why I decided to just go down the back, and that's just about it. Okay, so that brings me to that assembler over there in the back, and that assembler is standing right next to the one where we're making the pipes. So this was the pipe assembler that we made in the previous episode. This is the steel production we made in that episode as well, and as you can see I'm once again splitting off a resource, steel in this case, and combining it with the base machinery parts that we were producing from the beginning on, and then that's being combined into this single assembler, making some advanced machinery parts. Now this is not going to cut it for very long, but for now it's just a little bit of production to get going, and it also makes it very easy to just grab this out of the chest in case I need to make some buildings that use this as well. While the advanced machinery parts are starting to be produced, let's focus again on this base techno-rod production over here, because we're now making wires, we're making electronics, and we're making all the other stuff that we were making before as well. As you can see, this production is not quite going to cut it. Luckily, we have plenty of techno ore in the ground over here, so that is a very easy and quick thing to fix. Ta-da! All I did was just double up on the amount of smelters we have making technum rods, and of course I did make sure to add in another line of miners as well as a line of crushers to make sure we're using them second level of the recipe rather than the base recipe, because well, it's 50% more efficient, so might as well use it. Meanwhile, back at the box that was starting to produce or catch the production of our Mark II belts, we have now almost 500 belts over here, so that means we can start upgrading some stuff. Now you really only have to upgrade the belts that have a high throughput, but luckily when you want to do so in this game, it's super easy because all you need to do is just basically click on the belts with the Mark II belt selected, and the entire belt connected to this will be upgraded. Now, one thing to watch out for is that if you have any splitters, like I have over here, then you do have to actually upgrade those separately as well, and anything past the splitter won't automatically upgrade. So if you want to have the other belts after that being upgraded as well, then it's just a matter of a single click. Now, what's again really nice about this type of upgrading is that if you have very long belts, so say for example the belt I have over here with the advanced machinery parts, or the base machinery parts I should say, as you can see, even though the building range in this game normally is limited, if I upgrade a belt, you can see this entire belt got upgraded in a single click. So long story short, this game is awesome at letting you upgrade stuff. Speaking of upgrading, now we have some advanced machinery parts. What we can also do is start making some second level assemblers, because all we need is the first level as well as some advanced machinery parts on top of that. And again, upgrading this is super easy. Just like with the belts, just a single click on assemblers will upgrade them to Mark II. And you can see now the Mark II ones are yellow, while the Mark I assemblers that I have, let's say over here for example, sorry about all the twisting and turning, they are red, and these things are 50% faster. Now, unlike the upgrades of the belts, I actually do think there's very little reason to not just upgrade all the assemblers that you have to Mark II, because, well, that might throw off some of your perfect ratio matching and things like that. But honestly, because of the way the production works in this game, where you're usually overproducing something, and as you can see, sometimes belts get stuck, and then you are producing something else a little bit more, where you're using it, and then suddenly you kind of need a boost of production. All in all, I think it's more efficient to actually have everything upgraded. Just keep an eye on your belt, especially anything that is on infinite production, so things like research, for example. If that is actually gobbling up a lot of resources that you have intended for something else as well, that could get you into issues. But honestly, generally speaking, just upgrade all the assemblies you have to Mark II as soon as you can. Okay, so we're now producing some advanced machinery parts. We're producing some pipes, not in the ratios that we need them just yet, but for now that will do. But we also need concrete in order to start up our green science production. And in order to make concrete, this is where this beautiful casting machine comes in. It's a new machine, and it requires some fuels, or some liquids I should say, as inputs, as well as some solid materials, because we need cement, we need gravel, and we need water in order to make that concrete. Cement is made from mineral rocks and some xenoferrite ore, and gravel is also made from mineral rocks. So long story short, we're going to need some mineral rocks. Luckily, we actually have those right next to our base. One tiny problem though, although it's not much of a problem, but it's actually quite far down, and having to dig that out manually is not going to cut it. Luckily, we now have explosive, which we can use to blow things up. Now, you don't really need to set up a production facility for this, because honestly all you need is some random ores and some biomass, and biomass is something we could technically automate with greenhouses, but honestly it's a super annoying process that I don't think is worth the time and effort, and you don't need that many explosives anyway. So just handcraft a little bit of this, and then we can start turning those into the explosive shards, as you can see over here, which we need the wire coils and electronic components for that we just started creating as well, and we need an explosive detonator. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand just on top of where the actual minerals are, and then I'm going to throw down some explosives and make them go boom. A very satisfying way to actually reach a resource, and as you can see, this way you can very easily dig down all the way down to the minerals over here, and there they are, as you can see, and you don't have to manually dig out an entire hole like this with your mining drill. Setting up a mining facility all the way down here is actually not that easy. Now, what I've done over here is to combine a lot of these miners into a single Mark II belt. So we're using those twice as fast belts that we have access to now, and I'm just bringing them up like so. Now, of course, this would get you a nice little bridge that you can use to get all the way up, but you can also just build something like a ladder if you want to be a little bit more neat and organized. Now, specifically in order to be organized, I do recommend that you just power this by connecting the foundations all the way up to the foundations over here. So this is why this wall is here, because this wall is actually connected to the rest of my base, and this way I don't have to worry about how I'm going to actually power all this. Now alternatively, what you could do is just bring a whole row of power poles down here, for example from our over there where our turbines are, and then just have the power poles connect with a transformer all the way down here. Honestly, that's a lot more work than I think just building a stack of foundations is. Now, we have the minerals up here. Let's turn that into some gravel, cement, and what's the other thing? Concrete. That's the third thing we need. Now, because I actually need some water as well, and I need some xenoferrite ore in order to make my cement and stuff like that, I actually decided to bring the minerals all the way through the back over here, and this is where I'm now making my gravel. Now the gravel itself is a super efficient recipe. 10 mineral rocks actually turn into 30 gravel. We actually don't need that much gravel, but still up and running, and this is the first part of our new production line. Now, in order to make cement, we need some more xenoferrite, and this is why I added in another line of the miners over here. Now, honestly, this is complete overkill because the xenoferrite isn't actually used that much in this recipe. As you can see, for every 10 cement, we only need 5 xenoferrite ore, but we also need 10 minerals. So this is why the belt over here in the back, which is bringing in our minerals, and the Mark II belt. Remember, this is a Mark II belt, so there is 320 minerals coming in, or at least there would be if we were actually using that much. But as you can see, we are making plenty of gravel now. We're also making quite a bit of cement. I have 5 of these crushers making the cement, and that's actually more than sufficient for now. And that brings us to the concrete. And the concrete made in these casting machines that I just showed you before is a little bit more involved, because we need the gravel, we need cement, and this is going to go down here in the middle. And then you do actually need to pay attention to the orientation of these machines, because, well, as you can see, the fluids don't actually go into every part of this building. So you can see this is actually not using the water, even though it's connected to the water, but this side actually does accept the water. So as you can see over here, both of these things are oriented in such a way that they are both accepting the water pipe connected over here, but that does mean that this one has the control panel in the front and the other one has the control panel in the back. Now, honestly, that's kind of annoying. I would have appreciated it if I could just feed in the water on both sides of this machine, but there's probably a good reason why that is not the case. Speaking of water, it is going to come all the way from the back over here, where I have put down a gap in my foundations over here, and that's just feeding into this thing in the back, where I'm just sucking up some water from this lake. So that takes care of the water demand for my concrete. And there we go, we have a lot of blocks of cement incoming now. We already have the advanced machinery parts in production, and we also had the pipes in production from all the way before. And combining all of these 3 units into these Mark II assemblers now, we can start producing some green science. Now, again, we need to combine the previous 2 types of science into the same research processing buildings as the Mark III type, so we're going to have to do some rerouting. Okay, so what I've done is actually just remove the original research buildings, and I put a belt of blue science over here. I'm combining that with the production center of our red science, which again I put into a belt over here. So now I have the 2 old types of sciences combined here. I relocated the science buildings into a bit of a more central location, and I've already put down a belt for green science as well. So now all we need to do is hook all of these things up, and we can start doing some new science. And there we go. I started to research basic olemite processing, because that's what we're going to need next. And honestly, if you want this to go a little faster, you could increase the number of research facilities. But honestly, the main bottleneck is going to be our green science. So even though it looks like we're bottlenecked on the research buildings for now, my production, or my research I should say, just started, but we're not going to be producing a huge amount of green science just yet. Because in order to do that, we're going to need some more advanced machinery parts, because that's actually the only thing we're not producing enough in order to get 8 green science per minute, which is honestly doesn't sound like a lot, but I think 8 signs per minute seems to be about the sweet spot. Any less than that, and you're going to be waiting around for signs, and any more than that, and you're just going to be spending a lot of time building buildings that you don't necessarily need just yet. However, in order to make that advanced machinery parts, we're going to need some more basic machinery parts as well. And because we now upgraded these belts in order to produce more plates, we can also add in a couple of more machines in order to make more base machinery parts. I keep saying advanced machinery parts, but that's the next one that we're going to get to. As you can see, I now have a total of 6 Mark II assemblers making those machinery parts, and that's actually feeding the 3 belts that we're using these on quite sufficiently. I also tripled the amount of assemblers making the advanced machinery part, and yes, this time around it's actually the advanced machinery parts, and that means that we now do have enough production in order to make a total of 8 green signs per minute. And as you can see, we have a pretty steady flow of that now on this belt. Doesn't look like much, but again, it's only 8 per minute, so it's not going to be like this belt is going to be completely filled up. And that means we now have green signs up and running. We added this entire production facility in the back over here. We doubled our Technorod production. We started making Mark II assemblers and Mark II belts. And we upgraded a huge amount of the facility that we already had. We also added in the electronics, the wires, we added in some mineral production over here, and of course we added in the advanced machinery part. So as you can see, we probably doubled the size of our facility, and we definitely doubled the amount of stuff that we're actually producing inside of this facility. So that's a pretty big jump, but if you thought this was a big jump, then you're definitely going to want to see the next episode, because if this was doubling the size of our facility next time around, we're going to be expanding outside of this entire production block even. So yeah, that's going to be really fun, and that's actually going to add in new ways of transporting our stuff around as well. We're going to be producing power in a new way. All in all, you definitely don't want to miss the next episode either. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.